You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 558, One Small Step.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we go headfirst into an episode of Star Trek, sifting through the ancient detritus, seeing if we can find some morals, meanings, and messages, and baseball scores to the historical records.
This week, One Small Step, the one where Seven meets astronaut John Kelly, who, like Buck Rogers, is also from the 20th century, but unlike Buck, he isn't quite as chatty, and he lacks a robot sidekick. Hey, Norm, I'm glad we get to do this one together. Glad to have you back. How are things going?
Beady.
Exactly.
See?
Exactly.
I had to do it.
You know where I am.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to do this episode. I wasn't sure about this episode because I've never seen it before. I didn't even really, follow up about it. And,
Yeah.
I had some expectations. The one small step tagline, that's probably one of the most historical taglines in all of space travel history.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to talk to you about this because I'm just excited to be back on the air.
Excellent. I love it, man. Glad to have you here. Why don't you tell folks where to reach us?
Of course, we'd love to hear from all of you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help the podcasts you love is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your favorite podcast platform. And always remember, your comments could be used on the show, and the Roddenberry Podcast Network will not be denied. And now, here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
Okay, trivia for One Small Step. We have a story by Mike Wooliger and Jessica Scott. And these are new names for us, and it's the only Trek credit that we'll see from them in the franchise, at least so far. Now, Mike and Jessica are co-credited with a handful of genre scripts from around this same period in the 90s and early 2000s. Those include The X-Files, Goosebumps, Young Hercules, Cleopatra 2525, and Strange World. Mike switched over to a few directing projects here and there, while Jessica has actually racked up an impressive number of additional writing credits with everything from R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour to multiple Hallmark movies. When it came time for the teleplay, Mike and Jessica again were co-credited, but with the addition of the in-house team of Brian Fuller and Michael Taylor. Side note here, I followed a link from Memory Alpha to an interview that Robert Beltran gave in 2000, just after season 6 had wrapped. And he had his complaints, to be sure. In particular, he was unhappy with this very episode because in its original intent, I guess back to the pitch and maybe the original teleplay, it was, as he put it, a journey of discovery for his character Chakotay. And at some point, the focus shifted to Seven and her growing appreciation for humanity, which he estimated the audience had already seen. Now, this was directed by Robert Picardo, and you may be thinking, of course, Bob, just like so many Trek actors, was able to flex a little of his director muscle here before parlaying that into an additional career. Well, Bob directed Alter Ego back in Season 3, and he had hoped to direct again in Season 5. He had to wait a little longer for Season 6 to roll around for this assignment to come his way. But I'm kind of surprised that here ends his credits as a director for Star Trek or anything else. Maybe the opportunity didn't present itself, or maybe he'd had enough. Now let's meet our guest star this episode, Phil Morris, as astronaut Lieutenant John Kelly. And it is so nice to welcome back a returning guest star, someone that I'm a fan of anyway, and we have discussed on multiple occasions of Mission Log. Now, I always thought it was so cool that Phil, son of Mission Impossible actor Greg Morris, was a cast member of the 1980s Mission Impossible sequel series. But Phil is known for so much more, like his appearances on Babylon 5, Smallville, Seinfeld, and voice work on so much more. And do not forget his regular role on the Love Boat, The Next Wave. But it's on Star Trek where we've gotten to see him in multiple roles, going all the way back to TOS, where he was one of the kids in Miri, then on to Star Trek 3, where he shows up as a cadet on the Enterprise, then in DS9 as both a Klingon and a Jem'Hadar. So far, this is his last episode with Trek, but hey, you never know.
So I have a small story to share with you about Phil Morris, and this just happened recently.
Yeah.
So after watching this episode, I took a screenshot of Phil Morris as John Kelly, sent it to Shar, our friend of the Mission Log pantheon of shows.
Yep.
And I said, "Do you recognize this guy?" And she said, "Kind of." Then I sent a picture of him in his Babylon 5 episode, Severed Dreams.
Nice.
And she said, "Oh, that's him." And I'm like, okay, so here's some fun 6 degrees of separation with Phil Morris in Star Trek. The 3 shows that Desilu greenlit in its original production run were Mission Impossible, Star Trek, and Mannix.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mission Impossible, Greg Morris.
Yep.
30 years later, from the production company that greenlit Star Trek in 1966, we have Phil Morris now, son of Greg Morris, who was in the original Mission Impossible, appearing on Voyager. It's 30-something years later.
Right. And I love this sort of this parody, this euphony, if you will, that you've got Greg Morris on the Desilu lot shooting Mission Impossible, and you take just a few steps down one of the walkways and you go to another set and there's young Phil Morris in Miri. I think that's just so cool that they really kept it in the family.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Voyager's crew is about to meet a man whose last mission was about as impossible as can be.
Prologue. October 19th, 2032. Humanity's Ares 4 mission orbits Mars. While astronauts Kumagawa and Novakovich work on the surface, Lieutenant John Kelly monitors from orbit, recording observations and chatting about baseball. Suddenly, Kelly detects a massive graviton ellipse heading toward him. It engulfs the command module, severing contact with Earth. The fate of Kelly and the Ares 4 becomes a 300-year-old mystery. Act 1. In the present day of 2376, Voyager encounters that same graviton ellipse, and it's creating all kinds of amusing and not-so-amusing havoc with ship systems. On further investigation, it is categorized as a subspace anomaly, a graviton ellipse capable of engulfing objects and reappearing centuries later. 7 of 9 identifies it from her Borg days as Spatial Anomaly 521, describing its erratic behavior and danger. That rings a bell with Janeway, Chakotay, and Tom Paris, who all remember the stories of Ares 4's mysterious disappearance. When scans detect 20th century Earth materials inside, Tuvok's sense of exploration is piqued, as it may contain remnants of the Ares 4 lost centuries ago. Act 2. Janeway is interested in retrieving the lost module, just as Chakotay and Tom are. 7 questions the risk-to-reward ratio, dismissing the value of such historical artifacts. Undeterred, Janeway approves a mission using the Delta Flyer, modified with Borg shield enhancements, to retrieve the Ares 4 command module. The Delta Flyer is prepared for the journey, with Tom and Chakotay leading the away team. Despite her reservation, 7 is encouraged to volunteer, both for her expertise and as a learning opportunity. In Astrometrics, Tom and Chakotay review astronaut Kelly's final transmissions, both appreciating the old-timer's bravery and his role in the history of space travel. As Voyager monitors from a safe distance, the Delta Flyer enters the ellipse, with Harry Kim keeping an eye on the tractor beam just in case he needs to fish them out. Act 3. Inside the anomaly, Chakotay and crew describe the surreal environment back to Voyager. It's like a psychedelic light show and filled with ancient debris and some pretty strong gravitational distortions. Time is of the essence as the anomaly gradually shifts course and can and will disappear back into subspace. The flyer crew get to work searching out the Ares 4, but they've also got time to analyze some of the other fascinating debris they're picking up along the way. Tom locates the command module with the intent of extracting it, but the situation deteriorates rapidly when a dark matter asteroid is pulled toward the ellipse. They're ordered to leave, now, but Chakotay insists on retrieving the module despite the imminent danger. He gives the order, bucking Janeway's directive, and Tom locks on with the flyer's tractor beam. The asteroid collides with the anomaly, breaking the tractor lock, causing severe damage to the flyer and critically injuring Chakotay. The situation goes from bad to worse as Seven informs Tom that the anomaly is showing signs of returning to subspace. They've got maybe 2 hours to get things repaired and exit, or they'll be taken along with it. Act 4. Chakotay is badly hurt, which means he's got to sit this one out, other than suggesting a few ideas and generally annoying Seven. She fires right back at him with a reminder that it was his fault that they're stuck. With the anomaly destabilizing and Voyager's attempts to tractor the flyer out failing, the crew must find a way to repair the flyer or face destruction when the ellipse re-enters subspace. Seven's Borg shielding modifications keep the flyer operational, but only temporarily. To repair the flyer, B'Elanna suggests salvaging the Ares 4's ion distributor, which could replace the damaged component on the flyer. Seven volunteers to retrieve it, despite her continued skepticism about this whole thing. Aboard the Ares 4, she discovers Lieutenant Kelly's remains, along with his meticulous log entries, both scientific and personal, taken well after his craft entered the anomaly and he disappeared from NASA's Mars surface team. Through the recordings, Kelly recounts his desperate fight for survival and his efforts to document the anomaly. Seven relays them over the comms to Tom and Chakotay, and she listens as he records his initial attempts to collect data and find a way out. Act 5. Kelly's log playback continues, in present and in flashback, about his love for exploration, his attempts to escape the anomaly, and his acceptance of his fate. Moved by his courage, Seven retrieves the ion distributor and a download of Kelly's database. His final wish was for his data to be usable someday for someone, even when he knew that he wouldn't survive much longer. His mission shouldn't be seen as a failure, and his one regret was not learning who won the World Series in that same year as his mission. Seven attaches her comm badge to Kelly's corpse with instructions to beam them both back to the flyer. With the ion distributor installed, Tom pilots the flyer through the collapsing ellipse. Voyager locks onto them with the tractor beam, pulling the shuttle to safety moments before the anomaly vanishes into subspace. Later, the crew holds a memorial service to honor Lieutenant Kelly, sending his remains into space in a photon torpedo casing. Seven reflects on Kelly's bravery, and she whispers the answer to the one last question he had about the 2032 World Series. It was the Yankees in 6 games. The end.
Well, it may have been one small step as the premise goes, but it was one giant leap for creating that summary. Very tight, very wonderful description of how this episode went down.
Tight. That's what we like to do. Keep it tight. So thank you for that. I got to say, I don't know what it is, but I really like seeing an actual date given on screen. The pretense always with Star Trek is that the star dates were created as a way to throw the audience off back in the TOS days. You don't really know when it's taking place.
Right.
But it's fun for me when they'll retroactively throw something in like, oh, no, here's this actual thing that happened on this actual date. I think that's cool. And I really dig the Ares 4 spacecraft. I don't know if Eagle Moss ever made one. I got to dig back through. Oh, no, you're shaking your head. They didn't.
No, I don't
think it's so cool. It's just, it's plausible. It looks great.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much love like all of the design aesthetic on the Ares 4, internally and externally. Obviously, it was created so that it would simulate something in our time, even though it's, 12 years right now to the future of that. But the chunky buttons, the button rail guards, like the push button electronics, the way that he has like joysticks to maneuver, everything in that set, and his very casual flight suit, of which I never got a really good shot at the patches because I really wanted to see what the patches looked like.
Me too. Right. I
love that. I think this is kind of like for Denise Michael Kuda, Doug Drexler, everyone who worked on the production, that must have been like, you're going to let us do what?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. So much fun. By the way, Chunky Buttons, if anybody's looking for a new rap name, you can have it.
Right.
So, that's for you. Hey, Bokai. We got a shout out to Bokai.
So I looked that up because I'm like, I know that Buck Bokai. That was like Cisco's favorite player, or Cisco said the most famous player, like whose records weren't broken until et cetera, such.
Right.
The London Kings.
Yeah.
In baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I loved the reflection in Lieutenant Kelly's eyes as the camera zoomed in on his eyes looking at the anomaly. I just thought that was really good. Really, really well done.
Yeah. Everything I feel like in that ship was done with a lot of care and attention. You can really tell. I feel, once we cut back to Voyager, I feel like there's not enough moments in Star Trek where tech just goes wrong in a very relatable way. Like it's either things are humming along and they're perfect, or it's a disaster and you have to eject the warp core. But seeing Chakotay, seeing Chakotay sit there and it's like the doorbell's ringing and then comms are messed up, like that is so very relatable.
I loved the Native American fabric patterns on his chairs.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good. And the way that his whole, like the decor, the aesthetic of his suite, it just seemed very Chakotay. I mean, I was waiting to see kind of like a pan to see if like the magnetic medicine wheel was on his wall somewhere. But I like that he was sitting there reading a book, having a cup of something. And then everything just went haywire.
Yep, exactly. And come on, Seven, you know better. You can't just change stuff without asking anyone. You know that by now. But good job using humor. I like how she does that, and then Chakotay just kind of throws it back in her face later.
Yeah, it's very relaxed on that ship when it comes to, okay, what are we allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? It's great that you take the initiative, but it's not so great sometimes. Right?
Yeah.
Now, in all of that chatter that was going on, I was watching the episode with closed captioning on, and in the comms chatter, there's a female voice that says, "Computer, locate Naomi Wildman," and it's a female voice. Now, I don't know if it was, say, Sam Wildman, but it was someone looking for Naomi Wildman, and it wasn't Seven of Nine.
Good. I like to think that it's Samantha, and yes, it just let her please be around, even if it's a voice. Thank you.
Now, here's something for all of our eagle-eyed listeners and viewers. So Harry says over comms, all senior officers to the bridge. So Chakotay and Seven leave engineering together. Did I miss something, or when did Seven get promoted to senior bridge officer status?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And if so, then she would have had authorization to make those changes to the computer that Chakotay was lambasting her about. I'm kind of fuzzy with her access to things on the ship, right?
I think, they're keeping it very firmly fuzzy. It's kind of like with the Doctor as well. It's like, well, you're just a computer program. You can access anything, but you're just a computer program that we can turn on and off. It's, it's a little disturbing.
So I don't know if this is kind of like a precursor to, say, artificial intelligence now, with the database just getting fed just, data point after data point. But so the Ares 4 mission was lost 300 and something years ago before this event.
Yeah.
The computer on Voyager has the hull compounds of the Ares 4 capsule in detail.
Yeah.
To find it inside the anomaly.
Yeah.
That's pretty convenient as a data point, don't you think?
That is. I always wonder how that library computer works. Is it just you're constantly feeding it with every bit of information? You're going to run out of hard drives at a certain point, That's a lot of data. When we're in astrometrics, this is just a minor detail, but I am so glad that they did it right. Okay, when we see John Kelly's video logs from our point of view in 2376, we're seeing just a fixed camera angle, as opposed to the flashback version of his mission, where it's an omniscient camera, and it's just kind of moving around to give you the most dramatic effect. So often, TV, movies, whatever, they try to get away with just using the produced cut when it's actually an in-universe camera. They did it right here. Thank you, Star Trek, for doing it right.
You know, speaking of doing something right, I'm actually excited that Tom and Chakotay have really good scenes together, like these bonding moments over the Ares 4 mission. It just seems that they're not really kind of like distant from each other as characters. They're actually kind of coming together and sharing this very earned moment. I liked that.
Yeah, really nice moments for them, and Janeway's in on it too. Like she loves the history of it, but that was a good scene for those two. I do like how Tom is very aware of how much easier they've got it in the 24th century. Like that actually plays into his knowledge of the 20th century, which is still a stretch sometimes, but I thought that was a nice bit. Love the Doctor's line, one small step for a hologram, one giant leap for mankind, because of course the Doctor has no problem understanding not just the thrill and spirit of exploration. He had his own leap by just being able to leave the ship. That's a big deal. But also like kind of the personal patting himself on the back for being the one to do it.
The camera, though.
Yes, that giant prop.
It's a prop that I find so problematic. I don't know why, and I know that listeners are like, Norm, get over yourself, and I won't, because then you have like communications badges that are literally the size of a quarter.
Yeah.
Why can't something like a camera fit inside the badge?
I know.
Something like that. I'm going to get to that later on in another detail, which is
By the way, here's an interesting thing, though. You're talking about the data point of knowing the material compounds of the Ares 4. So I imagine this holocamera not only taking a fully rendered 3D image of whatever the subject is, I imagine there's some sort of tricorder component to that as well that can also tell you chemical makeup, that can tell you, capture whatever goes along with that image, weather conditions, anything you want it to.
John, I'm going to do you one better.
Okay.
I'm going to say that there's an actual tricorder that people use on the show that would do something like that.
Wait a minute.
Right.
What?
It scans in 3 dimensions, just like chess.
Okay.
3-dimensional chess.
Smart.
Remember, in Caretaker, there were something like 20 billion tricorders that were being used in that episode. So somewhere along the line, one of those would take photos and be a tricorder as well.
Good point.
So 7 says, you envy my participation in this mission to the Doctor. The Doctor says, there isn't a crewman aboard who doesn't. Someone in the hallway would be like, excuse me, I don't know how long this is going to delay our trip home. I mean, I'm all for it, but...
Like, there could be a wormhole right over there that we're just not getting to yet. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So... thank you. I know we're not supposed to like mention other series, but thank you, Lower Decks, for implanting these moments in my brain.
Yes.
For something like this to be a reality.
Exactly. I really like the communications chatter coming back from Delta Flyer to Voyager, and I like that we don't see what's happening at that time because it very cleverly kind of mimics, Kelly's own communications back to his team and from his team back to him. So nice to see that just done with audio. Also like the kitchen sink anomaly as a thing that we'll call it because, hey, I like the idea of kitchen sink being a term that makes it to the 24th century.
Well, 20th century expert Tom Paris,
He would know.
He knows these things.
Right.
Also, a fantastic backstory with Chakotay about his love for paleontology. My people's college focus and major intensifies.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But all kidding aside, I dig that we're getting a little bit more Chakotay, a little bit more backstory, and it's not something that someone else fabricated for his historical background.
Right. Absolutely agree with you there. Also, he says, we've never encountered a metallic life form. And I'm thinking, well, there was this thing called a horta. And, if you look on the periodic table, silicon, a whole lot closer to metal than to carbon. So,
Wasn't there an episode not too long ago where they actually were copied by liquid metal aliens?
Wait a minute, you're right. You're right.
The one where Harry was like the leader of like the liquid metal copies?
Yeah.
Okay, so just I'm not the greatest, trivia guy in the room, but even I picked that one up.
Pay attention to your historical records. Yeah.
Just saying.
I really like this moment with Seven struggling to admit what she wanted to be when she was a child. And yeah, look, ballerina may be obvious and common and, whatever, but it's little moments like this, seeing her play the hesitation and the discomfort and then being able to get it out, those are the moments that really humanize her. And I just, what can you say? She's so good, and that's a good moment.
I don't remember, though, in like flashbacks in The Raven or other flashbacks that referenced Annika Hansen, if she played with a ballerina doll, or was there any kind of detail in her flashbacks?
That's a good question. I mean, maybe that's a little detail that could show up somewhere where we can just agree to have a Mandela effect moment and say that it did.
Sure.
Even if it didn't, because it's so much more satisfying that way. I did kind of wonder for the science heads in the audience, could a dark matter asteroid ever be a thing? I know what dark matter is, kinda, but you let us know if a dark matter asteroid could ever be a thing.
Isn't it matter that you can't see?
Yeah.
So can they see the asteroid, or is it just sensors see the asteroid?
I thought it was just sensors, yeah.
So if you had to target a dark matter asteroid, would it still be targeting asteroid?
That's good. That's very good.
When the Delta Flyer got hit by the shockwave from the dark matter asteroid, I was waiting for Seven to turn around to somebody to say, "I told you so."
Uh-huh.
And she kind of did, but I was just waiting for that, just her turn around, camera zoom, and just big eyes like, I'm so angry right now.
Yep. And I know that we have to build the drama, but there is quite a lot of time, if you rewatch that scene, there's a bit of time for Tom to hesitate when Chakotay gives the order to turn on the tractor beam. Because literally in that time, Chakotay says it, you just, boom, hit the button, it's on, let's go. But when we're stretching this out, I think they wasted a good 20 seconds within that for them to talk about it. He could have just done it, and they could have headed off, and he could have waited and said, oh, no, bad idea, we'll turn it off, we'll get out of here. Saved a lot of time. A lot of space in that back room of the Delta Flyer. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the layout is. And I kind of like seeing the display of the EV suits, so I wondered why they're in cages, because just the only people on the ship are you, the people who need to get to your gear. Right. So just make it easier to get to,
We need instant survivability as long as we get through that cage.
Yeah, right. Did you remember the key? Do you remember the password to unlock the lock?
Oh, double password protection. Darn you, Apple.
Oh, man. Yeah. Interesting moment of Seven with extreme attitude, putting Chakotay in his place.
Yeah.
Not unlike Chakotay has and probably should do more often to Janeway, but Seven is picking that up from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I love the honest anger. I mean, again, it's earned rage, because she's there and she's like, you know what? We wouldn't be here if someone didn't love history so much.
Right.
I will. For being another Data, this is little d, not big D.
Right.
Or else it would say Data.
Yeah.
Data reference point. For a ship on a mission that happened 300 years ago, B'Elanna's computer schematics are incredibly detailed.
That's true. That's true.
But then again, the chemical composition of the Ares 4 module was also in the computer. So, hey, what do I know?
Yeah. You have to wonder, now, if I were to go onto a modern aircraft carrier, would they be carrying around detailed schematics and chemical compositions of, like an 18th century warship?
Well, it's just squeeze all that data into the computer because reasons. Why not? I mean, just whatever you need. Just
you might need it. Better to need it and have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Exactly. So I love the scene where Chakotay tells Seven to take a minute to look around so you can tell us what it was like, referencing inside the Ares 4 module.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to imagine that, the EV suit, once you get past the cage and the double password protection, once you get that suit on, that it doesn't have, a built-in like a GoPro or a recording device. Because,
Right.
again, so we're in 1998, 99 production-wise.
Yeah.
And there are cell phones, flip phones, that have cameras that record in like 10 megabytes or megapixels or something like that.
Yeah.
Really something very, very primitive.
Yeah.
It's the 24th century. And what happened to the doctor's camera?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, she's supposed to be there filming things,
Yeah.
right? And no GoPro, no camera, no nothing. She
Yeah.
did have a tricorder, though.
She did.
Right?
Yeah.
And the tricorder recorded everything. So again,
Everything.
I just watch these shows. I don't make them. I also love the sound effects of the encounter suit walking across the Ares floor. I love the sound effects of the magnetic
Yes.
boots, and I love Jerry's miming the gravity footfalls of those
Yeah.
magnetic boots. Very smart.
I imagine that we got it before, but it's really pronounced in Star Trek First Contact when they're doing that fight on the hull, and you really hear it. And I'm glad that that's a detail that is pervasive now. Whenever you have an EV suit moment, like I think
Assimilate this.
right, exactly. And man, when we get into that final act, I love all of that footage with Lieutenant John Kelly. And how cool is it that he gets to be the one to confirm extraterrestrial life / technology, only there's nobody around to hear it. You know? And I love that line. What I've seen proves that we were right to come out here. It's a great scene. It's a great sequence. And it doesn't disrupt kind of, Star Trek's own history of encountering other life, but it just makes it this really sweet, special moment.
I didn't look in detail of all the debris that was flying around the module. I was just wondering if we saw anything that was familiar from like a fuselage standpoint, or some type of ship detail that looked like a Klingon, symbol or a Vulcan symbol or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure there's just tons of stuff around. Kelly survives, I guess I counted like at least 6 days in the command module while he's inside that anomaly, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I thought the detail of his beard growth was very good.
Yep.
Just a passage of time type of detail.
Yeah. Speaking of, heroic acts, like I kind of wonder, he takes life support offline, but he makes sure that the imager keeps running. Now, I do wonder from a technicality standpoint, is that the right way to go? Do you shut everything else down but keep life support on? Because maybe you'll figure out on the next try a way to get out of there. But regardless, it tells the most dramatic story here. And I love, 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 love the great subtle reaction on Seven's face as Kelly makes his very last log entry. It just says everything. In the great tradition of a good script shows, doesn't tell, and that was a great moment of showing, not telling.
Yeah, I love the moment. It's around the same time, probably within a few seconds, where she pulls John Kelly's photo of he and his wife, from his console and puts it back. Like, she didn't take it with her. She puts it back exactly where she found it. Like, don't disturb anything until she does, but don't disturb it right now.
Nice shot of seeing the wedding ring, too, which I hadn't, when I went back to rewatch a couple of times, then I saw a much more pronounced shot earlier in the show when we were in the flashback sequences. And I was like, oh, of course, we see it there, then we bookend and see it again at the end.
Something that really surprised me, though, is B'Elanna can pilot?
Yeah. I guess so.
Emergency pilot out of there?
Yeah.
Are there no other people on the bridge that are like secondary pilots? I don't know, Janeway?
I think Harry Kim might actually be better at that. Who knows?
It's just, I mean, I know they got to put, Roxanne in there in that scene for reasons, but it's just like, when did she learn how to pilot?
Right. Seven is the master of understatement because she doesn't even bother to give her fellow crew members a head up like, hey guys, I brought back the distributor and a corpse.
Right?
One of these you asked for, one of those, just trust me.
If you're out here trying to tell Houston you've had a problem, I have bad news. You're way outside your service area.
We'll get right back to One Small Step after a word from this week's sponsor, ExpressVPN.
John, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How protective are you about your cell phone? Do you have a nice case on it? Do you have a screen protector on it? I have a pretty thick case and screen protector on mine.
Yeah, because let me tell you, all you need to do is drop your phone once, which I've done more than once, and it wasn't even my fault. Literally, standing in line somewhere, somebody bumps into me, my phone goes flying, and guess what? That is a costly repair.
So you're saying that you wish you had some kind of protection on your phone at that time?
Indeed.
Okay, because going online without ExpressVPN is basically like carrying your phone, John, without a case. Oof. Well, most of the time you're probably fine, like you think, but there's that one time when someone bumps into you and crack. Instant regret.
I have been in that position. Yes, the classic, I should have spent a few bucks on a case moment, except in this case, we're talking about your personal data, passwords, banking info, all that sensitive stuff.
Exactly. Whenever you connect to an unencrypted network, like, say, a coffee shop or a hotel or an airport network, you're basically broadcasting your data to anybody who knows how to grab it. And trust me, you don't need to be like a tech wizard to hack someone. These days, even a smart 12-year-old with the right hardware could pull it off.
That's right, a kid. Great, my personal data on the dark web because of some middle schooler with too much time on their hands.
And hackers make serious cash selling that info, like up to $1,000 per person. But here's the good news. ExpressVPN makes sure that doesn't happen by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet.
So it's like, might I say, activating a force field around your starship when you need it. Nothing's getting through.
I love that. Exactly. And honestly, ExpressVPN is the enterprise of VPNs. Top of the line. It's so secure, a hacker would need a supercomputer and over 1 billion years to crack its encryption.
And that is just slightly longer than it takes me to reset a forgotten password. And on top of all that, ExpressVPN is ridiculously easy to use. You open the app, you press one button, boom, your data is protected.
Plus, it works on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, mobiles, you name it. No matter where you go, you're covered.
And look, this is not just us talking. We both use ExpressVPN. I've mentioned before working in public places like an airport lounge and thought to myself after a second, wait, this network is basically a playground for hackers. So I fired up ExpressVPN and I could keep working without worrying that someone was snooping on me.
I feel the same way. I do a lot of shopping online, and knowing ExpressVPN has my back gives me peace of mind, because I'd really prefer my credit card number not become a trending topic on the dark web.
Exactly. So if you want to keep your data safe and sound, here's what you do. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/missionlog. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog, and you can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/missionlog.
Go ahead and put that force field around your data. You'll thank us later.
All right, Norman, I feel like there is something central to both of our notes that we need to get into, and that is 7 raising the flag here, as she should do, as probably Chakotay should have at least said, like, boy, I think this is a really cool thing, but I also think we need to exercise some caution here. 7 makes great points about weighing out the risk of exploration versus what is actually to be gained. She's pointing out that the anomaly is dangerous. There might be some more sentiment at play than there is scientific knowledge to be picked up. And Janeway makes a good argument. Hey, Starfleet could have sent out a bunch of probes, but that's not what we do. I refer you back to John Kelly's experience. Like, yeah, he didn't have anyone to share the experience with. He couldn't get a signal back to his ground team, though he did still do the job of collecting the data. And he was there to prove that we're not alone. And all he wants is just for somebody to put it to good use. And I hope that you, in the future, don't look at this as a failure, because I don't. So let's pick this decision apart a bit here, because I think clearly the show is leaning on this side of saying, No. We don't send out robot probes because part of the whole point is the human experience of exploration and discovery. And that's why we take those risks. I point you to Captain Kirk saying, risk is our business. That's why we're aboard her, meaning the Enterprise. But,
It'll be interesting when we get to my notes.
Okay. But let me compare this to something else that is relatively current and recent. Okay, I'm an ocean liner fanatic. Love ocean liners. Love history, right? We discovered the wreck of the Titanic in 1985. That's when Robert Ballard discovered that ship that had been missing for that long. And since then, there have been numerous peopled and unpeopled expeditions to go check it out. And there are things that have been learned from those expeditions. However, in my humble opinion, there is not much more to be learned other than maybe we send down things with better cameras before it disappears entirely.
But how will we find the heart of the ocean, John?
Well, I laugh and then, flash back to a couple of years ago when some people who were absorbing that risk died in the process because they didn't take the proper precautions. And they were just one in a line of expeditions that were also extremely risky. And I just want to say, you know what? I get the spirit of adventure. I get taking a risk, but you didn't have to do that. And you certainly didn't have to do it when the conditions weren't optimal. In this story, the conditions are not optimal, and we're trusting technology that is 300 years more advanced, and Janeway's very confident about it, and certainly confident with Seven's abilities on board. But I think we got to pick this apart a little bit and figure out who's right and who's wrong, or maybe at least who has the better argument.
Well, here's the issue I think at hand with the exploration of this anomaly. Okay, so we poked a little bit of fun at these very specific data points in the computer. The ability to be able to find the Ares module solely based on the chemical composition of the hull metals that the computer has, and the schematic that B'Elanna has in order to find the warp thing that Seven has. So you have this information of the Ares 4 module in the computer. If the Ares module wasn't in the anomaly, would Voyager have been interested in studying the anomaly to that degree and take that risk?
No.
I would say no.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think at most they would shoot a probe in there and go, look, there's a bunch of space junk. And then, and then leave, because the whole proposition is too dangerous. You got to penetrate that thing to get into it. You don't know if you can get back out, and it could just disappear at any point back into subspace.
So the way that I remember the episode falling, just in terms of the narrative plot line, it's like, oh look, spatial anomaly absorbs the Ares 4 probe. Cut to the cold open. And then cut to the news, the scene where Voyager, like, hey, look, there's a spatial anomaly. Didn't Ares 4 get absorbed by a spatial anomaly like this 300 years ago? You're right. Let's investigate that. Just because there may be a correlation between those particular events. And this is where you get into this interesting tug of war between nostalgia and academia. Yeah. Right? Because, okay, this is what Seven says to Janeway in the ready room, because she kept sitting there, and Janeway's like, what's your problem? And Seven says, how will retrieving this artifact enhance your appreciation of history? Right? And Janeway says, by making us part of it, in the same way that excavating the obelisks of ancient Vulcan or finding the Shroud of Kalis made those explorers a part of their history. Here's the crux of it. As a Borg, you didn't study the past, you ingested it. You never really developed an appreciation for humanity's history.
I do love that line.
It's a good line, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this is an opportunity to do some exploring of your own. Now, I understand Janeway's passion for that. The show is called Voyager. You are a Voyager into the unknown. You explore. But there's also the whole, remember that time in Caretaker when you said, I'm going to get this crew home no matter what?
Oh, right. Yeah.
There's that. And there's the pragmatism that this Borg has about space is dangerous. Do dangerous things happen to you, right? So where is the balance between risk and reward, as you said, with Janeway's ultimate goal of getting them home versus taking these side quests that, I don't know, people die on in this show?
Yeah.
Right? And again, like, let's lower decks this a little bit. You have like a couple of crewmen hanging out in the mess hall. Neelix gives them some coffee or some pie. And then you hear someone say, hey, we're side questing this thing now.
Yeah.
At this rate, we're never going to get home. Right? Now, comedically, sure, we can think that, but it's true. The more you divert your resources and your talent and the risk of all of that, the less your odds are of getting home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So which is more important?
Right. Well, I mean, certainly getting home is more important. And there's something that you pointed out that is the big coincidence of the episode. For as many hundreds of hours of Star Trek as we have all watched, the number of anomalies, spatial anomaly, it's graviton anomaly, it's a photonic anomaly. It's, I would say that it would be impossible for anybody to just recognize it on site and say, oh, yeah, that's the thing that ate a spaceship 300 years ago, because who knows? So that is the big the thing that this show is asking you to swallow just to get into the story, that by coincidence, this happens to be the day that they ran into that anomaly that reminded somebody of a much older anomaly that they didn't actually see with their own eyes, and you're relying on just a fragment of telemetry that was picked up 300 years ago. So that's a big if, if those things could actually align to actually get us into the story. Once that's done, though, if we accept that as our launching point into the story, I think we have to accept that Janeway and everybody else are satisfied with the level of precaution that they're taking. And let's assume that everybody on the ship agrees, all right, maybe this will take us a few hours, maybe it'll take us a day. I guess we're on board with that, because I guess there's the opportunity to find this thing in there. But I wonder, what is the scientific information to be gathered from that is of value today to those people on Voyager? Today, meaning 2376, right?
Right.
It's very interesting that you can say, well, John Kelly from NASA is the first person to determine with evidence that there is extraterrestrial life and technology. Okay, kind of cool. There's nothing actually to be learned from the ship itself. There's nothing actually to be learned from the mission itself, because the mission is long over, So all we're doing is just kind of filling in a footnote in history. And I realize that is a very important footnote, and I'm not trying to diminish it because I think that's not cool. I think that is wildly important. But I think for the sake of our conversation here, it does raise this question. I go back to my Titanic example a moment ago, which is, okay, if there's nothing actually to be learned again that you need to know for some way to fill in the historical record, then why spend the time and the effort to keep going there? It might have just been enough to determine, if you shot a probe in there, wow, the Ares 4 is there, and wow, the body of John Kelly is probably still there. Unless they thought it was a time-hopping anomaly and there's the possibility that he was still alive. But we didn't even get into that. Really, the question just comes down to, is that reward something that is usable, something that is practical, or do we just say, that's his final resting place? We now know what happened to that ship.
I'm glad that you brought that up. I mean, those are great questions, and I think one of the things that I'm still trying to wrap my brain around, if they find something that culturally, tethers them to this part of human history, I know humans care about it, but what about the other species that are on Voyager that I don't know if we have any other species on Voyager, really, because we don't really see anything aside from humans.
And we know about one Vulcan. We know there is a Vulcan. We haven't seen it in a long time.
Right. Yeah. But when Janeway's talking about, the Klingons finding the Sword of Kalis or the Shroud of Kalis, I mean, these are monocultures. It's important to them, right? Because monoculturally, it's a focus for their history. It ties their history from the past to the present. I get that. But what they're doing with Kelly is that you're basically risking the lives of 150 something people because humans are interested in what's going on with that anomaly. Not everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very kind of, again, Homo sapien centric. The other thing, though, that I found really interesting is I felt that Chakotay was a little too overzealous in what he wanted to achieve by finding the Ares 4. Now, the reason why I bring this up, because I felt that he was a little reckless. Mm-hmm. He risked the Delta Flower, he risked Seven and Tom by staying too long in the anomaly to make sure that they grapple onto the Ares 4. Mm-hmm. Right? So he also wanted to go inside the Ares 4. Now, isn't that sealed capsule in almost every way the final tomb and resting place for Commander John Kelly, right?
Yeah.
And if Chakotay was able to do what Seven did, isn't that a form of desecrating someone's grave? Now that's arguable.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
The reason why I bring this up, John, is because one of the character details that I loved about Chakotay all the way back to season 1's Emanations was how he respected the burial site that was supposed to be able to provide data on their current situation about some type of like random energy that was coming off of those decaying bodies.
Right.
And he said to Janeway, I recommend we leave these bodies in peace, Captain. However, Mr. Kim has a different opinion. Harry says, with all due respect, Captain, I have to disagree with the commander. This is our first contact with this race, and I think we should be learning all we can about them. It's a unique anthropological opportunity. Chakotay says, I understand the chance for scientific discovery, Captain, but whatever belief this race has, they clearly meant for their dead to be left alone, and we should respect that. The sanctity of these bodies should be respected. I recommend we make visual observations only, no tricorders.
Oh, my God, that's right.
So by this example, are we to believe that Chakotay's desire to somehow emotionally connect with the last moments of his childhood hero supersede his cultural sensitivity to one's final resting place? In other words, the sanctity of Kelly's body should be respected. Or does that only apply to when there isn't human history at stake in the realm of space exploration? That's my issue with that part of this story.
Wow. Well, and I guess, if we were to go with that and assume that there is some continuity here for Chakotay, which we can't assume because maybe at this point they had completely forgotten about emanations and not been thinking about, Chakotay's mindset at the time. But you actually could have a moment where Chakotay is the one to raise that flag. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that could have been, say, where Tom maybe was pushing a little more of the hero worship than Chakotay at that moment. Okay, so Chakotay, he made the bad decision. They stayed in the anomaly. He gets injured. Seven is beyond herself. She's beside herself with anger.
Yeah.
And Tom's like, we still got to, we still have to do this. We still have to, figure out what happened on the Ares 4. And then Chakotay has this revelation. He's like, no.
Yeah.
No, we've risked too much, and this is where it has gotten us.
I mean, here's the thing. It is a contrivance that you have to send Seven or somebody over there in person to retrieve this thing. You couldn't just lock onto it with a transporter. You couldn't do any of the other things that we would normally do. No. You have to send her over. You have to have the physical, present, emotional response to what's going on there. In a less dramatic sense, you could just shoot a hard drive over there, download whatever you could from the records and say, okay, we got the data, we got the device, we don't have to go desecrate that space.
Right, but that's the thing. It's like, that's why I also have a problem with her putting her comm badge on Lieutenant Kelly's body and beaming that out. If she put the picture back, why would she take the body with her?
Right.
And if you put, I know this is funny, but if you put, it's not funny, but it's ironic. If you put a communicator on a deceased body and says, just lock onto my communicator, aren't you supposed to tell somebody like lock onto a communicator to beam up?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How much of that body are you going to beam up?
I know.
I think she should have just taken the picture and the ring and find some ways, like, I'm going to save this and try and find some way to return it to his family.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there you go. But then we lose some of the drama here. we can only rewrite so much because
that's true. I'm sorry.
No, but that's okay. I think they found the most dramatic way to tell the story to make it hyper personal for her, which is great. I think you have to do that if you're going to tell this type of story, but it doesn't negate this conversation about, well, what are we really gaining here? How much are we willing to risk? What do we actually gain from that risk? And how much are we willing to kind of put aside what we would say is a valid argument from Chakotay's much earlier point of view, which is, yeah, you know what? We don't just walk into somebody's tomb.
If the sight of feral spacesuits in cages is upsetting, you could be that spacesuit's forever home. Contact the Delta Flyer to adopt a stray spacesuit today.
Well, John, we have come to the end of One Small Step, and we've taken many small steps to get to the end of One Small Step, where what we do at Mission Log, traditionally, we look at this episode in total, see if the episode actually does hold up, if it stands the test of time, and then afterwards we'll see if there are any morals, meanings, and messages that we're able to mine from an episode like this. A lot of things that we talked about in this episode, John, a lot of very interesting topics. Which would you like to do first in terms of taking your one small step?
Well, let's see if this one holds up. Unabashedly, I have to say that I love this episode. It's always cool to me when Star Trek uses just a little bit of fictional but plausible history to tell its story, to kind of ground it and connect these far-off future stories with what is maybe just around the corner for us. So I'm definitely a sucker for stories that weave in the space program that way. As a production, I think the production value is high. We both talked about how much we love the Ares 4 craft and the effects that we get out of that. I think the zero-G effects are pretty good. Those are not always easy to pull off, and it's always simple tricks. It's just like, okay, tell the actor to kind of move around slowly, but they pull it off. They look great. And speaking of our guest star, Phil Morris is just spot on. He's great. And I like what the story does here in terms of bookending two experiences of risk. John Kelly's experience of risk and the Voyager crew experience of risk. They're all putting themselves out there in one way or another, accepting and facing some level of risk. And Seven is our point of view into the episode. She's the one who gets to see how those lines between what is acceptable risk and what is not can get very blurry. And hopefully we all learn a little something from that experience. I also want to point out that just as a piece of TV writing, this particular episode does something very effective, which is you bring in a strong guest star whose character already has a great, compelling story, but you still manage to make the character arc about one of our main characters. Shows are not always effective like that, and Star Trek is not always effective like that, because sometimes you have a guest star come in and you really just feel like they're a prop and they're just there to service the needs of our main characters and push them along. But not here. It happens, it is contained. We get what we need to get out of Seven and her experience, but we also have this rich and fulfilling story about this guest character. So I think it works. It fires on all cylinders. Very well done. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, this holds up for me for a few specific reasons, but I do really love this episode. You're right. Phil Morris as John Kelly, MVP of this episode, hands down. I think his performance in Act 5 with his choices to suspend life support in order to keep his sensors running and just understanding that the mission is more important than him trying to hang on for a few more hours. I mean, that's boldly going, right? Mm-hmm. Where no one has gone before. That is literally like the DNA of Star Trek, or at least kind of like this exploration type of spirit. And I thought that was just so brilliantly done at the end. I love these two themes that are like that we talked about that was going on in this episode. You have boldly going versus unnecessary risk, right? I love it when Robert Beltran is giving quality scripts to work with. Now, even though that this was a script that was flipped for him to a Seven story, I still think that he really got more than he's gotten in the past. I mean, we learned some things about Chakotay that were, that weren't quote unquote, under the stigma of the My Peoples type of writing that was happening with Chakotay earlier on with the Rubber Tree people, etc. So I thought that was really good. I love how Jerry pulls off just that cold, calculating, analytical pragmatism of Seven of Nine. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's not that she doesn't understand why. It's just that your why isn't good enough to supersede the logic of should we. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I love how she pushes back. And I think as a character, she's the stand-in for we, the audience. Like, why are you doing this? Don't you want to get home? Why are you going on these side quests and risking your ship and your crew and your personnel and your resources? So there's something a little bit more specific I will say later on about that. Yeah. And then, of course, I can't gush more enough about how much I love the production, design, aesthetic, and detail of the Ares 4 module. Yeah, I love the flip switches. I love the switch rail protection so that you don't automatically jumble switches because your fingers aren't working right or you're wearing gloves. Right. Right? So they protect, mistakes from happening. I was just watching a documentary on Apollo 13. And it wasn't From Earth to the Moon, and it wasn't obviously the movie. It just goes to they were focusing on a lot of what happened when the module had the issue, and then they were just flipping all these switches and pushing all these buttons. They were focusing in on the panels. I'm like, that is the space aesthetic that I love. Yeah, that look. I really, really, really love this episode. I think it holds up as a fine example of what Star Trek does best. It illustrates how we as human beings strive to be better and to reach a brighter future through what Gene Roddenberry would say as being clever humans who work hard. Yeah. Right? But there also has to be a balance between, say, Chakotay's recklessness in chasing a nostalgic past and Seven's pragmatism of not chasing anything at all. But I think I'll go into that later when we get to morals, meanings, and messages. Well, hey, look, we've arrived at morals, meanings, messages. So, hey, look at that. Look at that. I think for all the points that we were able to present and kind of debate a little bit, there's not a specific right or wrong answer to this. It's about gauging what is an acceptable level of risk versus what is a very human thing. How much do we put ourselves out there for scientific knowledge, for historical knowledge, all the things that really make our lives and our experiences whole. So that's not to say that 7 of 9 is 100% right or wrong, or Janeway is 100% right or wrong. These are all very fuzzy gray areas that we get to navigate. And I think this episode does a pretty good job of making the case for humans exploring space rather than robots, because it is about that personal connection, that moment of discovery and human experience. It is very easy and, well, also necessary to an extent for us to send robots out there, send probes out there to get information first. But then the next step is we've got to go out there too. So I like, in admittedly a pretty short scene, very few words, just kind of Janeway making that case to Seven, saying, no, this is what we do. And I like how Janeway describes it as the moment that they, collectively, the Voyager crew member, become a part of the history too. And I don't think that's a totally selfish thing. I think it is an important and relevant part of that process. 7 of 9 says to Chakotay, history is irrelevant. Irrelevant. And then Chakotay does his best to really try to get through to 7 about how it is not irrelevant. Sure, you could always make the case. You can say, look, those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. But we're talking about something beyond the practical, beyond the political or social there. We're talking about the emotional connection to history. And I love these moments, and I love Seven's journey here, because you can't just
tell someone history is important, you should get something from it, it's more than irrelevant. You actually have to show them. They have to experience it. And there is no substitute for a hands-on experience. So what I love here is Seven of Nine's journey. Everyone who I've ever met who didn't get excited by history or going to a museum or looking at artifacts, I wish that I could get to those people on the emotional level that Seven experiences here. She's got to go through it herself. All the words don't matter. It's about that experience. There's something really beautiful about that. Now, yeah, in the context of the character's journey, it's one more step toward her humanity. But in the broader sense, it is every human's connection to the past. Everything has a story. And that's why I geek out about old TV shows or museums or old restaurants, whatever. I fall in love with the stories that got them there and then allow me to experience a little piece of that past, just to make that little bit of human connection. And that's what I see here. What about you, Norman?
I love and I agree with what you're saying about that. I think the interesting part, and I think, again, the dichotomy of the two storylines that are at play here are appreciating that nostalgic past, appreciating what it stands for, but at what risk? Why are you doing this, and what are you doing in terms of, is the risk worth the reward? And that's where I kind of fall into the morals, meanings, and messages. How do you balance that risk versus reward? Is it worth it? We haven't done this in a while, so we're going to do a little bit of role playing.
Ooh, yeah,
because there are a couple of specific scenes of dialogue that I really want to kind of focus on, because I did a little bit of homework jumping back and forth between a few episodes of Seven's development then and now. Would you like to be Seven, and I'll just do the other?
Sure, I'll read Seven, and because you got a couple of them.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Okay, for our first scene.
Very well. We were ordered by the captain to leave this anomaly, but you chose to disobey that command. As a result of your obsession with the module, we are now trapped along with it. In all probability, we won't survive without.
Point taken. Now, why don't you continue without the attitude?
An inventory of the damaged systems. Read it for yourself.
I made a mistake. I put the mission at risk.
Put our lives at risk.
End scene. So this has pretty much been my center of the criticism of Voyager from a narrative standpoint in total. Earlier on in this episode, in Astrometrics, Seven says to Tuvok,
when the risks outweigh the potential gain, exploration is illogical.
We can't predict what we might find here, Seven. One must allow for the unexpected discovery. That exchange between Seven and Tuvok reminded me of a very similar scene from the episode Random Thoughts in Season 4, where Seven says,
your philosophy of exploration exposes Voyager to constant risk. If you maintain a direct course to Earth and avoid all extraneous contact with alien species, it will increase your chance of survival.
Well, that would make a dull ride home, says Janeway.
Captain.
We seek out new races because we want to, not because we're following protocols. We have an insatiable curiosity about the universe.
Your chief engineer and security officer were nearly lost today. That is unacceptable.
To you, maybe, not to me or my crew. Our experience with the Mari gave us an insight into a culture we've never encountered.
But that is irrelevant.
No, it's how we gain knowledge.
Then we are in disagreement.
Now, I will always side with Seven when it comes to this particular debate. That's just my opinion. Captain Janeway on more than one occasion has lamented that she hasn't or isn't getting her crew home quickly enough, and that she's exposed them to unnecessary risk, or in some cases has lost crewmen during these exploratory missions, quote unquote, when she could have chosen to stay on course for home. However, and this is one of those lessons, forget everything you heard before the word but. But unless you take the risk, then you will never learn what is needed to evolve and grow. You said it earlier, John, and I'm glad that we write our notes independently, but this is how strong this statement is in the history of Star Trek. From the original series episode, Tomorrow is Yesterday, Captain Kirk said, in probably the most famous speech of famous speeches in Star Trek, risk is our business. That's what this starship is all about. That's why we're aboard her.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, the Voyager Conspiracy.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. It's a good thing this was a garden-variety subspace anomaly and not a wormhole. If the astronaut they found was the Farscape guy, that would have been complicated. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.